Hey up and welcome to the Temple of Bleh episode L. This is another entry into the History of Roadrunner Records series, and this time it is Metal Mike. So Metal Mike is the owner, creator, general head honcho of Aardschok magazine in Holland. He's basically been everywhere and done everything in relation to metal since the late 70s, early 80s. Name any band, name anything, and he's had some input into it. The conversation itself would just absolutely kick ass. It's a little bit cringy because I was asking a lot of stuff about Roadrunner business side, and he kept saying, I'm the music guy, I'm not the business guy, which he was completely right about. However, even in going on about the music stuff, he managed to relay so much information to me about how Roadrunner worked, especially in the early 80s, and how Case was working out of the Amsterdam office and who he was working with and all that cool stuff. So this is Metal Mike Part 1. We're going to have another chat soon, and in that chat I'm going to gear more of the questions about the music and his perception of what Roadrunner were putting out at whatever time we end up talking about. Anyway, what you want to do is you want to check out Aardschok magazine, because the thing is, and you'll hear this, and if you're watching the video you'll see this, the guy knows fucking everything. Aardschok is very much like a written in stone tablet testament to the guy's knowledge of metal. He's a resource that we need as a community to mine from every day, and Aardschok is the product of that information and of that knowledge and of all those experiences in one magazine. So do yourself a favour, give it a Google, and enjoy this chat, Part 1 with Metal Mike. 1, 2, fuck shit up!
So what are you writing a book or making a what is your problem?
The project it's kind of, I call it a grade amateur docuseries. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to paint the picture of Roadrunner from back in 80 when Case started it up until 2012 when it was bought out by Warner. The way it's presenting itself at the minute is kind of through timelines, PowerPoint kind of episodic presentations. But also interviews like this. So really, I'm just trying to speak to the people who are there and get an idea as to how it ended up doing what it did, and the people involved and all that good stuff. And your name keeps coming up in that period in the 80s.
Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird?
Yeah, but the thing is, there's no through line narrative about Roadrunner except like in liner notes, like in the 25th anniversary Roadrunner United album and things like that.
I was there in New York.
Were you at the office in New York?
No, I never was in the office, and I kind of never worked for Roadrunner, but that's a different story. But I worked for Roadrunner, but not as you might think.
So curious.
Yeah, this is really weird. Well, I can just start a story and then you can.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some questions, but let's just take it from the
start with your questions first, and then I'll elaborate on that.
Cool. All right. Okay. So, but it's interesting how I came to sort of realize that Metal Mike equals you, because there's a few Metal Mikes. There's the guy that played.
Oh, there's only one.
There's the guy that played for Halford.
Metal Mike Shashlik. I talked to him. I had him play on my 20-year anniversary of the magazine. I told him, you can't use that. Why not? I've been using it since 1981.
And there's one on Twitter as well. There's a guy called Metal Mike, which I don't think is you. But I kept sending him the pictures of like the metal, thanks to Metal Mike in the thanks sections of like Satan, Merciful Fate, all those old records where you're in the thanks section. And
Kill them all, Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, you name them.
Trojan. Yeah, man. So let's start from the start then. So what was your first interaction with the Roadrunner? When did they sort of appear to you as a thing?
Okay, that's funny. I'll start that story.
Go for it.
Because I saw you had I don't know who you were talking to. You had like a timeline which started with Jim Croce, and then it
was that's my mate. That's my mate Raw, and that's everything I had at that time. I'm gonna have to redo it all again because I think there's so much more information I've got now of that period.
Well, I
Yes,
saw the first metal album, which was down on that same line, was Anvil, right?
that was the first metal reissue, I
Metal
believe.
record.
Yeah,
So I tell
absolutely.
you how he got that record, okay?
Go for it.
I started in 1980 with a magazine called Aardschok. You know, I've been doing that for 40 years now.
Yeah.
And the reason I started the magazine where you're based in England,
Yeah, north of England, yeah.
north?
Leeds.
Okay. So, and I started a magazine because there were all that new wave of British heavy metal bands. You know, you already mentioned Satan, but I was working with Raven, Venom, well, a lot of those bands doing shows and stuff in Europe with them, but nobody was writing about those bands. So I thought I starting a metal magazine to write about all those great new bands. Even Saxon, Def Leppard, Iron Maiden were little nobodies at that time. You know, Maiden only had when I started, I think only the Running Free single out and the Soundhouse tapes, for example. Twisted Sister just had 2 promo singles out in New York. Well, it was a lot of new bands bubbling on there. Nobody, you know, in our music magazines, you only could read about Kiss, Status Quo, and AC/DC. I said much more bands actually, and so I started a magazine myself. And because I was a fan of the new wave of British heavy metal, I traveled to England a lot, to Newcastle to meet up with Dave Wood in Tyneware in Wallsend to buy all the singles he put out on the Neat label. Then I went down to Durham, where Guardian Records was based. Then I drove down to Birmingham to meet Paul Birch, who had Heavy Metal Records. And I also went to Port Vale a couple of times. There was a huge warehouse there. You know, in England, there were 2 musical newspapers, Enemy and Sounds. I think they were bi-weekly, and one week was Enemy and the other week was Sounds that came out. And they always had advertisements in there. And one was of a warehouse in Port Vale. And why I tell you this, I was in Port Vale and taking all the singles out of the racks to trade with pen pals all over the world. Masahito in Japan, who started Burn later. Mike Varney, who started Use Metal Records or Shrapnel later. Brian Slagle, who had a magazine, Heavy Metal Review, who started Metal Blade Records later. There's a whole lot of, I could write books with that kind of history. But
I'm sure you will.
So I was there taking out all the singles out of the rack, and a box came in, a big carton box. And they opened it up there to put it in the racks for their distribution, whatever. And it was a Hard and Heavy album by Anvil. Hey, this looks cool. Never heard of Anvil. Oh, great. 2 guitar players. Oh, they look cool. I'll get this. And it was a shipping letter in the box. So I took not only the vinyl, but also the shipping letter for this Canadian import. And when I got home one day later, I called the number on the shipping letter, and I get Al Mayer on the telephone. Al Mayer is Alexander Mayers, the head of Attic Records Canada, the boss of Attic Records. His phone number was on the shipping letter. So I got in touch with him, and I said, you know, can you take care that, or can you make sure that this album not is only available as an import, but also that our metal fans can buy it as a, you know, as a European printed album, vinyl, so it's not so expensive. So I'm just a metal fan doing this kind of stuff. He says, well, I heard of a guy in Hilversum who wants to start a record company. His name is Cees Wessels. I never heard of the guy, definitely not a metalhead. Otherwise, I know most of the metalheads, kind of, you know. So he gave me an address. So I drove to Hilversum, and where that guy was working in a little office. I think it was part of Polygram or Phonogram, Polydor Phonogram, or I think, I'm not sure. I think it was Polydor then, but I'm not sure. So I met Cees Wessels and I gave him my copy of Anvil's Hard and Heavy. I said, well, I talked to this guy in Canada, Al Mayer, and he says, he told me that you would start a record company. Yeah, I think blah, blah, blah. So I gave him my copy, and Al Mayer sent me a new copy of the Anvil record. And that was my first meeting with Cees. That's how it started out.
The first thing you did was distribute to him, effectively.
I gave him the first metal record that he put out.
Yeah.
Well, not give it to him, but you know, the guy in Canada told me that he was. You know, that's how I got involved with Cees Wessels. And in the years after, or in that time, I my pen pal Mike Varney, Shrapnel Records. He started with 4 compilations albums, the US Metal Heroes or something it was called, part 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then he started to put out real records like Cacophony and Marty Friedman solo records and all those guitar heroes. But Mike Varney never wanted to license his stuff. He just wanted to do everything out of Novato in California. So I flew up there, went to his house and had a long talk with him, interrupted every 3 seconds by a phone call of a band member trying to find another band member to start a band. On the one line, he had Billy Sheehan looking for a guitar player to start a project. On the other line, he had a singer looking for a drummer. Every few seconds, the phone was ringing for a musician looking for musicians when I was there. So, and I convinced him to release the stuff outside of America, or to license it to Roadrunner for Europe and Japan.
Right.
So that's how that got. I didn't work for Roadrunner. You have to understand, I'm a metal fan.
You were networking. Yeah. You were just making metal happen. You weren't working for anyone.
Yes. So as a fan, he took me to Midem, which is in Cannes, France, where all the record companies came together. I'm not sure where that still is, but in the 3rd week of January, or the 4th week, was always Super Bowl weekend. So it was the 3rd or the 4th week of January. We were in Cannes for a week, and I was working in a booth for him, and I got all the cassettes from the bands who want to get signed in, to listen to them, and send them away with a smile. No, this is not what Roadrunner is looking for, but I can do a review of my magazine. So I got a lot of shit for my magazine, and I met a lot of my pen pals, because Brian Slagle came down. Mike Varney was there 1 or 2 years together with Peter Morticelli, who had, what's the label? Something with an M. A progressive metal label. Peter Morticelli runs it.
Peter Morticelli.
Yeah, and he licensed his stuff to Roadrunner. Like Steve Vai and stuff, that kind of prog. Right. And
I can't see him.
Peter Morticelli? Hold on, I'm going to check now.
Well, I'm on it as well. Okay, hang on. I'll find him on Discogs. Magna Carta. Yeah,
that's the label. Good. I said something with an M. So he had a lot of progressive bands, and he came there together with Mike Varney. So I met Peter Morticelli there, and that's how. So I was doing a lot of stuff for Roadrunner to getting bands signed. As I was doing the European shows of Raven, Venom, all those. Well, Satan, Merciful Fate, and a lot of bands.
Yeah.
And so I got in touch with Steve Wood, who all the time came down with the bands when I was doing shows. I thought he was their manager or something. I didn't know. And so Dave Wood released his stuff to Roadrunner for Benelux and Germany, Austria, Switzerland. And Italy had a different distributor. I'm not sure what it was. But so I took care of that one, and probably around 85, somebody told me, this is called A&R manager. It's a job. I said, I don't know. I just want to get this stuff released on his label. Like the first Merciful Fate EP was recorded in the Netherlands on Ravon Records. Ravon Records was a label run by one of my writers, Stefan Royakkers, and Jacques Hustings, who worked at the local record store. And he also had Stefan also had a lot of pen pals like Ken Anthony in Copenhagen, who sent him all the demo stuff, the pre-Merciful Fate stuff. Yeah. So they recorded the first EP on Ravon in the Netherlands, and the first full record that came out was an Aardschok magazine compilation record with several Dutch bands.
Okay.
And so when the label or the bands became too big to run on that little label, licensed to Roadrunner. Right. Not licensed to Roadrunner to put the first Merciful Fate out. Let me give me a second. I have so much diamonds in my vinyl collection. Let me grab this one. This is a nice one. the first Merciful Fate record, Melissa. This was the original cover, which
Wow.
never had been used. So it has the Roadrunner stuff, but I don't know who didn't like it. But this was what Melissa had to look like. This was the first one.
Awesome. I love King on this.
I have the lacquers here. This is like 15-inch lacquers. There's only, but also I have so people could, you know, they could die if they see the stuff I have in my collection. People would die. They would, you know, hire a plane and rent here and did, you know, give me shit loads of money for all the stuff I have. I have like so much, but that's okay. But I'm a fan of the music and I collected a lot of shit.
Sure.
So that was Merciful Fate. Came to the label through Roadrunner Records. And so in around 85, somebody said it's called A&R manager. You know, it's a job. Okay. What now? But I have my magazine. It's getting bigger and bigger. And I was starting a corporation in 85 with Metal Hammer, the German Metal Hammer. This was 2 years before the British Metal Hammer started. And I said, okay, I'm going to do the magazine. It's called Aardschok Metal Hammer now. We did it several years. So the ground floor, well, first the office was in the Willem van Egenstraat in Amsterdam. The ground floor was the office, and 2 sets of stairs up was where he was living. Then the office moved to the Van Egenstraat, next to the Vondelpark in Amsterdam. And there the ground floor was the Roadrunner office, and 1 floor up was Aardschok Metal Hammer. Wow. So I could use their office, so I could do their A&R work, write bios in 3 languages, because I speak English, German, and Dutch. Okay. And so work for Roadrunner and work for the magazine at the same time.
So let's take that as let's take that time period then. So why did Case want to go for metal? Because he was an opera guy. He had no connection with metal, right?
No, not at all. Well, he was a smart businessman, but he didn't know jack shit about metal. Yeah. Well, that's okay, but he knew how to. And I mean, I always saw the sales sheets, and Jim Croce was selling a lot. I mean, that paid for all the bills in the company. Wow. Because metal was not that big yet, not in that big scale. So the bands that sold the best were, of course, the Metallica records, because they kept on selling. You know, that's not a story. One of my pen pals, where I don't know where to start, you know, because it's so.
There's so many threads.
And there's okay. I'll give you one little example, and then you know where it ends up, where it adds up to. Lars Ulrich. I mean, Aardschok was the first magazine ever do a feature on Metallica. Right. And only because of their demos. Not the No Life Till Leather demos, but it were all single cassette songs with 1 song. Every time when Lars had finished, or James and Lars had finished a new song, they sent it to me because they wanted to have my opinion on the music. So, and then Lars called me. You know, we always do shows on the West Coast. What do you want to do shows on the East Coast? He said, you know who you can, you know somebody. I said, yeah, sure. Hold on, now I grab something else. So, it's nice to show that stuff. Hold on, makes it nice. Let me see. Okay, here's one. There's a guy called Johnny Zazula. He does shows on the East Coast. This is Rock and Roll Heaven. Saturday, October 13, 1982, with Riot, Anvil, and Raven. And I was doing the bookings for Raven. So, okay. Right. And Vandenberg, by the way. So, this is, hold on. This is the Raven Metallica, the Kill 'Em All for One tour. Metallica had Kill 'Em All out and Raven All for One. Okay, this was the first independent, little small independent label doing a worldwide American tour. Wow. Hold on. So Lars called me. I said, yeah, Johnny Z. I do shows with him, with Vandenberg on the East Coast and Raven. I just sent him over there. And they stayed in the band house, I think, with Anthrax members also there. Anthrax didn't exist yet. I think Scott Ian was there. So I told him, you know, good, Johnny Z, he does shows in Brooklyn, Long Island, blah, blah, blah. they went over there, staying on the way over, flew Kirk in. They were staying in the same house, Bent House, where Raven was staying around that time. He couldn't get the band signed to a label. Nobody wanted to sign Metallica, so he started his Megaforce on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And Megaforce, he released his stuff for Europe to Music for Nations, to Martin Hooker. And I made sure that Roadrunner did Benelux, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, all the releases for Music for Nations in our part of the world. That's something I arranged with Johnny Z.
Mm-hmm.
So where were we? I don't know.
We started asking. So why did Case go for metal? And you were saying, well, it sold. You know, that's the thing.
Yeah. Okay. So Metallica. So we put out Metallica. I'll just tell you, this was the long run.
I feel like I'm throwing a grenade at you. There's so much.
Yeah, there's so much. But so that's how we got involved, having Metallica stuff.
Cool.
And Sage was surprised that the Metallica record kept on selling. Normally, an album would sell really high numbers in the first couple of weeks, and then it trickles down.
Yeah.
And with Metallica, it just kept on selling. I did their first European tour I put together. The seven. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's another story. I'll give you a small. Yes, everything is connected with a story.
Yeah, sure.
I did a festival, the second Aardschok festival in 1982, and I had Venom as a headliner, but their gear got confiscated, got stuck after a show at Johnny Z with them at the Canadian border. So they didn't have the gear, so they had to cancel their headlining show. I had Merciful Fate opening, Trans from Germany, Raven, Vandenberg, and headliner was Venom. Venom canceled, so I put Accept there as a headliner. I was doing the bookings for Accept too. Yep. So it was all my bands I was working with on the festival. Because Venom, I thought the music sucked, but there was so much hype built around the band. I said, I'm gonna do your first show, and then I won't work with you again. Just the first show, because everybody, is want to see this biggest band with the biggest show ever, bigger than Kiss, blah blah blah. So they didn't play in 82. So I was preparing another festival in 84, the 11th of February, 84, and Venom. And so I said, I called Lars, you want to play this festival? I sent you money for plane tickets, blah, blah, blah. That's how it went way back. No John Jacksons of this world were involved yet. So he said, yeah, but can we do more shows? So I called Eric Cook, who was the manager of Venom. Yeah, we're doing 7 shows, but they can't do the last show, the Hammersmith one, for the 7 Days of Hell tour, because we're going to shoot that VHS video, and there's so much explosives and stuff, we can't have another band on stage before we play. There's so much shit lying around there. Yeah. So I told Lars, you can do 6 shows. There's 3, I think, one in Cologne, the first one was in Poperinge, Belgium, one in Cologne, Frankfurt, and the last of the 6 of the 7 dates was the Aardschok Festival, 11th of February, 84. So I had Metallica playing there and Venom. So I don't know why I was telling this, but it had to that's how I got Metallica into Europe. I did their first tour. I arranged their first tour.
But this is you just as you as a consultant, not you as with Roadrunner or anything like that.
No. I had nothing to do with Roadrunner. I started working for them in end of 85, beginning 86.
Oof. So even though you were always
getting all the bands on the label, sure.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, just a metal fan trying to get that stuff out on a metal label.
Yeah.
I could start my own label. I would be in a different position now, but that's. I mean, so I didn't work. I did. So I did a lot of stuff for them, but just as a metal fan, I wanted to have that stuff out. But my main thing was I'm still already 40 years doing this magazine. So
you appear on the thanks to all of these albums. Is that just because in your capacity as Aardschok, giving them reviews, giving them the spreads and the exposure, and
I can get them signed to a label.
Yeah,
I can get them signed to the label.
Yeah. So on that point, then on getting signed to the label in '83, Aardschok '83, that's the festival of that year appears to be the day quite a few bands end up getting signed to Roadrunner. I think that's where Merciful Fate put their ink on the dotted line, as well as Satan.
It was 82.
Oh, it was
June
82.
82.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
83, I didn't have a festival. I had one in February 84, and I had one in middle of 82.
Right. Okay. So with Satan, specifically about Satan, was that a recommendation on your part? Because of where they're based, I said, surely you guys should be with Neat Records because you're next door to Neat because they're from up in Newcastle. And they said they called them up and they got told where to go. So how did they end up in front of Case?
I don't know how they got signed to Roadrunner, but I have a little story. Just no. I mean, it's
I love it. I love it.
I had shows booked for them. The first one was at Dynamo Club, and then some more shows.
Yeah,
and they were stuck at the border because in those days you had a carnet, which was a list of gear you bring across the border, and they check the list. And when you come back across the border back home, the same stuff has to be there. So you didn't sell it, So it was called a carnet. It was Satan's first tour. Brian wasn't in the band yet. Brian was in Avenger or Blitzkrieg, and there was a carousel of singers at the time. So the first tour Satan did was with Swifty, with Ian Swift, who was also in Avenger. But Brian Ross and Swifty changed position a couple of times, and then some were in Satan, some were in Avenger, and some were in Blitzkrieg. The first Blitzkrieg record, was already written around 82, but it came out in 85, 86. But that's a different story altogether again. So they were at the border. So I got a call. Yeah, we can't cross the border. We don't have a carnet. So we need somebody who can vouch for us so we can cross the border, and puts up his money as a deposit kind of thing. So if we come back and they check, we can get back and across. So my father, who had a barber shop, he vouched with his shop. So they could enter the country for their first tour.
Okay. Wow.
But I didn't sign the Satan to the label. I didn't work for the label yet. I don't know how they got Satan. I don't know how they got them. But I made sure that first tour happened, or my dad did.
Yeah, fair enough. So at this time then, so before you're hired at Roadrunner doing A&R, who else is working with Case? Because I don't know who's there. Is he a one-man band? Is he?
He was there, and he had one promoter guy who did working for went with the stuff to radio station stuff. His name was Dennis Kloot. And Dennis Kloot, I think around 82 or 83, he went to Indonesia. I had a brother. I don't know what his brother's name is, but Kloot is his last name. And they started a record company called Dino, I think. Dino Productions, Dino. And they released compilations, records, and Stars on 45, and all kinds of compilations where famous Dutch artists were singing together some hits and remakes and stuff, and was number one in the charts for half a year or something. So it was really it's called Dino Records. And Dennis and his brother did that out of Indonesia when he left Roadrunner, but he did some promo for radio. And that was it. But there was also a connection with Roadrunner. I think the distribution went in the first year through Bertus. And at Bertus, one of the guys, Bertus was a link between Bertus and Rough Trade. I'm not sure how the business ties were around then. And that part of the company was run by Jan van der Linden. And Jan van der Linden also had a label called Provoke, where he did jazz and bluesy artists. And when I worked at Roadrunner in 86, there was a guy working there called Ed van Zijl. And Ed van Zijl later became the owner of Provoke and Mascot Records puts out Arian, but also all the Joe Bonamassa and all that stuff. And Edwazal started to working some financials, or I'm not sure exactly in the financial department. He worked for Roadrunner in a different room for, I don't know, bookkeeping stuff. I'm not sure exactly what he did, but he started that label, Provoke and Mascot later. And he worked with me there. And then you had Wally van Middendorp worked there also in an office, but he ran, I think, a dance label or something. I'm not sure. I'm not into that kind of music. But Wally, then he started to work in the Goat Productions, in the Good. It's an American company, I think. He does still work for, and he's involved with Alter Bridge, and I'm not sure what his thing, but he worked there also for, I think, for Rough Trade, but in the Roadrunner office. I don't know exactly how the connection was, but Jan van der Linden was, let's say, the co-boss or working with Says on a lot of things. But I'm not sure how their deal was. So there was a Jan van der Linden there. He wasn't sitting in the office, but when there were big meetings, he was always there.
Okay.
And he had, and Says had a secretary who did all the stuff that had to be handled. I don't know her name.
Like when King Diamond would call. Hi. That'll be her. Okay. I'm just trying to pull together like a family tree, because you don't hear about any of these guys at all in any of the songs.
On the Linden, he had Provoke, and you should call Ed from Mascot. Ed, I'll give you phone numbers. Well, Ed runs Mascot, but he started working in Roadrunner, I think 86, maybe 87.
Yeah.
But he did all the, I don't know, bookkeeping, financials. He probably knows more about the business side because he bought the company of Jan van der Linden. So he can tell you probably much more precise what the link was with Jan van der Linden and Says Wessels, how that company was structured in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Says was the lone owner. I think Jan van der Linden had a part of it.
I think Steve Ricardo said the same thing, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that."
Who's that?
Steve Ricardo.
Okay, Steve, who does kind of A&R for Nuclear Blast now in New York, same as Monty does.
I don't think he's at Nuclear.
I met Steve a couple of times at Meet 'em, of course.
Yeah, he said you shared a room and got hammered for 3 days or something like that.
Oh yeah, in Cannes at the Meet 'em, sure. And 1 year, and I think in 2006 or no, sorry, 1997, I think, Monty, I met him for the first time. He didn't know shit about. I worked him in. I introduced him to a lot of people and stuff. It's so funny, and they were all on the Rue de la Croisette, where the Meet 'em was. You have all those ladies, hookers standing around, and he was trying to be the cool Italian. And then he lifted her shirt up, or how should I say? She lifted his shirt up, his skirt up, and he jumped like 4 yards back. He asked for too much meat. So that was my first meeting with him. But he, I think the first band he signed to Roadrunner, I think, was Sepultura. But I didn't believe in Sepultura because I was, Aardschok had also, no, I have to explain a little bit.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I just understand there's so many threads and so many stories.
Yes, there's so many. And we start talking, I remember, like in 83, I started with the German Aardschok, a German...
Yes.
Version of Aardschok magazine, and it was run by Axel Tuberville. And Axel Tuberville was a guy who had a record store in Essen, Germany, and he did my magazine, but he also started a label, Shark Records. Right, and one of the first signings on Shark Records was Sepultura. So the first two Sepultura albums in Europe were released on Shark Records. So I was working with that stuff through him. Uh-huh. But I thought it wasn't interesting enough for Roadrunner. And then a year later, I think Monty got tipped off by Borivoy Krijian. Borivoy runs, there's another story. Borivoy runs Blabbermouth now.
Yep.
before Barvoy, Sace asked me, are you interested to starting a news web zine,
Right.
for
Okay.
news worldwide?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
a Blabbermouth was a Roadrunner thing. I mean, I think Barvoy got paid by Sace Wessels or
Mhm.
by Roadrunner to start that Blabbermouth thing. But
Okay.
Sace asked me before. I said, no, I have my monthly Blabbermouth called Aardschok. I can't
Yeah.
do another job on the side because I think it's got. I mean, internet didn't exist around that time, or just.
Mm. Its
I mean,
infancy. Yeah.
yeah, Roadrunner had a telex machine where you could type in stuff that came out at the other end at the New York office. That's how they were communicating.
All right.
But so I did everything through the phone. Letters, took a month to America and stuff. So Steve Ricardo, I met him in Cannes and in Milan, and also Monte Connor, 86, 87 maybe. But
Yeah.
I went for Says there for 10 years in a row.
Right. So you worked was this working at Roadrunner or working with Roadrunner?
No, I didn't work for Roadrunner. I went to meet him for 10 years in a
you
row.
went to meet him. Okay, sorry, right. So when
meet him is that
industry
festival, whatever industry thing, sitting at the bar with Davy Jones and drinking a $40 beer. So Davy Jones, the singer of the Monkees. I said, it's your fault that Dave Bowie had to change his name. Yeah, well, it is. David Bowie is Davy Jones, and he had to change his name because the one from the Monkees was so popular. That's why he changed his name.
Yeah.
But I was sitting at the bar with him. You meet all kind of weird people, but also a lot of metal people out of business, pen pals. That's why I like to go there and meet those people. Like for me as a magazine, wanted to get something done, calling a New York office and you get a secretary on the phone. No, I would say, no, Mr. Blah, blah, blah is in the meeting. I said, tell Al it's Metal Mike on the phone and he'll definitely want to talk to me.
Yeah.
So I met all those people in, at the bars having a drink and chat, and so I liked meet them because I got to know a lot of people personally and I didn't have to go through those walls to reach the right people. And, but that's always how it worked. I mean, that's what I did with Rod Smallwood and all those, people. It's just on my speed dial, dealing direct with band members and managers, and always have done it that way.
I've got one more question about Case, and then I want to work into the A&R stuff. Did he A&R for Black Sabbath back in the 70s?
Well, I think Black Sabbath was on Vertigo, and that is a sub-label by Phonogram or Polydor.
I think there was a conglomeration of Polygram, Vertigo, and a few other bits and bobs. A few other British ones.
He worked there before he started Roadrunner.
Yeah.
It could have been, but I don't know. I met him when I brought the Anvil record into his office.
Yeah. I think I read it somewhere on, I think it was Gloria Cavalera's blog, saying, he was Sabbath's, and I just had I've had nothing else since then to sort of verify that. Not that she'd lie, but it'd be good if someone else knew.
I don't know. I know Gloria. I mean, a long time before she, got in touch with Max.
Yeah. What was she? Was she just a manager at that point in the mid '80s, just managing bands? Because she wasn't working for Roadrunner format.
I think she worked with Sacred Reich at that time, and that's how she met him at the Dynamo show. Andre, who works in the office here, the desk next to my desk, Andre works here, and Andre's been a writer for Aardschok since '81.
Is this Andre
Verheusen?
Right.
He's part of Dynamo Open Air.
Got it.
He works for me already 14 years. When Dynamo stopped, I got him. I took him under my wings. He works for me, but now with COVID, he works out of home. Actually, he'll be here tomorrow. But yeah, I worked with Andre. Well, he's one of my best friends, so I talk to him 5 times a day or something.
Because he did things, because he gets, how I was saying at the start, you appear on the thanks section of so many albums. So does he. But it's always thanks to Andre Voyes and his mother. Is there a joke?
Yeah, because Satan and Merciful Fate and James and Lars, they stayed. His dad died when he was young, so they had a lot of space in the house. So they had some
Right.
extra bedrooms. So when I or Andre did tours with those bands, they stayed at his mom's house with him.
That's it. That's the mystery solved. I've been trying to figure that out for ages. I wondered why that was
That's
always
why
how it was
Merciful
worded.
Fate stayed at his house. Well, a lot of bands, but Merciful Fate. Raven always stayed. I mean, Raven last year stayed at my house. You know, they still come down here and crash at my place. When some tour dates get canceled, they come over and stay at my house for a week, and I feed them, and we go out and do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I still do that for Raven.
That's nice to know that Andre was part of that story back then, but now he's still working and he's still writing for you.
Okay, there's a little story. Okay, a little side story.
Cool.
Because my pen pal Brian Slagle, the Metal Blade stuff in Europe was handled by Roadrunner. Brian Slagle was a pen pal of mine. When Slayer put out the second record, Hell Awaits, they came to tour in Europe. May 85, 80. In May 84 or 85, God. Doesn't matter. So the first show was at the Heavy Sounds Festival in Poperinge, Belgium.
Yeah.
And they were licensed from Metal Blade to Roadrunner. So they said, you know, can you take care that Slayer is, they can't talk well about Roadrunner, that we take care of them and stuff. I said, sure, I'll, you know, I go down there anyway, because, you know, I'm doing a review of the festival.
Show, yeah. So
I got there, and the crew was the 4 band members. Johnny arrived, Tom's brother, who's still, well, until last year was in the crew still.
Yeah.
Doug Goodman, his tour manager. He was a t-shirt. He worked for Ron Boutwell, which was a t-shirt company in California. Their office were on Malibu Beach, and he was the driver and also doing t-shirt sales and a tour manager. And KJ Doughton, who was a pen pal of mine at that time, was running the Metallica fan club out of Portland, Oregon, Oregon. Eugene, Oregon. Me and KJ started Aardschok America in '87.
Oh, cool.
So KJ Doughton. So you will see on the thanks list for the Metallica albums, you will see KJ Doughton. So So KJ traveled with Slayer, Tom Mariah's brother Johnny, and Doug Goodman. Doug Goodman. They had a van with rented from an English company. So the steering wheel was on the right hand side, and it was a stick shift. But nobody in the band or Doug could drive stick shift because all those Americans only know automatic. So I thought, you know, Case asked me to put in a good word for the company so Slayer would be happy with Roadrunner. Said, you know what? I'm gonna drive you through Europe. Me and Andre going to drive you through Europe. Andre never had driven a car in his life before, didn't have a driver's license. The steering wheel was on the right-hand side. That was okay for him because always in a car, in a European car, he would sit at the right-hand side because I'll be on the left-hand side driving.
Yep.
So for him, it wasn't no different.
Yeah.
So when we drove up the highway and I was shifting until 5th gear, then would crawl behind my seat and take over the steering wheel. I said, you know, push in the clutch if you have to brake and stuff. And then I'll shift up again. And then that's how we drove through Europe with Slayer, the Hell Awaits tour.
Insane.
Yeah.
As Andre
so much side stories to that tour. And I gave everybody a paper camera to take pictures. And then halfway the tour, gave them all to me. I got them all developed. So now I have a stack of this high of pictures of the first European Slayer tour.
Oh, wow.
And there's a lot of stories, but this was Doug Goodman's first tour and he failed miserably. But after that, he started to be a tour manager, I think for 15 years for a band called something Green Day.
Oh.
So he was, for 15 years, he was the Green Day tour manager. And the smallest show they did in Europe when I met him not too long. Well, a few years ago, it was like 20,000. I think was the smallest venue they did.
Wow.
So he did that for I think 15 years, and he stopped doing that I think 2 or 3 years ago to take more time with his family.
Sure.
So that's Doug Goodman, and his first tour he ever did was the one where he had to drive the band, but he couldn't drive the car. So me and Andre drove Slayer through Europe.
Has Andre learned to drive since then? Properly?
In America, got his driver's license in America, but still he doesn't know how to drive a stick shift, but he can drive automatic.
Yeah, fair enough. It all works out then.
Yeah. And then Andre was doing, the Dynamo Open Air festivals, the first, which was like the blueprint for more than one day festivals like Grass Pop and Wacken.
Yeah,
all those huge plus 1 day, 2 or 3 day festivals at camping. They all learned the ropes. They all got all inspired by what Andre did with Dynamo Open Air. That's awesome. how Bob Schoenmaker started to do Grass Pop in Belgium, and Thomas Jensen and Holger Hübner started to do Wacken in northern Germany. But there's all so many stories and side stuff. And I'm kind of in the middle. I'm the spider in the middle of the web, making it all happen. But if I tell you this sounds like it's arrogant. But it means I'm just a metal fan. And nowadays I interview people, and then they tell me stories what I did for them. I forgot about, because like when Lars calls me, I say, no, go to Johnny Z. I do shows with him on the East Coast. And Johnny Z becomes the guy that makes his own label to put the first 2 Metallica records out,
Yeah.
But it's just me, hooking him up with that. Like I did an interview 3 months ago with Arjen Lucassen from Arian, which is a huge artist in Europe. He said, yeah, nobody wanted to sign me, but you made sure I got my first deal in Japan. I sold 50,000 copies. I said, oh, fuck yeah, Aki Morishita. Aki Morishita was a guy I met during the Roadrunner time and meet him. And I knew he signed that kind of band.
Right.
One of my pen pals was Masa Ito, who started Burn magazine a few years later. On that festival with Venom, Raven, and Venomberg and stuff I was talking about, he slept on my couch. Mm-hmm. Masa Ito flew over from Japan and stayed for a couple of days at my place when I was doing that festival. Mm. This was before Burn existed.
Yeah.
He wanted to start a magazine and wanted to see how I was running things. I said, well, come that week. I have a nice festival going. So
very cool.
Weird how stuff
it's because it's all community driven, and you were just right in the middle, and you were just there.
Yeah, but as a fan, not as a business guy or something. I mean, I'm still doing my monthly magazine out of here.
Yeah, man. So in '85, do you say you were hired as A&R, or you were just doing A&R?
I was just trying to get bands signed to the label I believed in, but not as A&R man, just as a fan. And I was doing PR when I was working at the office. Yeah. Like I went into the studio once a month, and I was we had cassettes like the new Carnivore record and whatever, new Mad Max and stuff. And I would go into the studio in Hilversum and have one track of all of the upcoming releases. Mm-hmm. And then was talking in English and then also in German and in Dutch, and make cassettes with a radio show with upcoming releases and give all info for the what you call it, the salesman. I'm not sure. The people that go, you have a lot of people working at a company that go to the record stores and make notations. Oh, you want to have 5 of these, 10 of this, 20 of this record. I'm not sure what it's called, salesman, or what do you call it?
Stock person, I don't know.
No, a guy that goes from door to door and wants to sell you a vacuum cleaner. That kind of
salesman. Yeah,
salesman. Yeah, and Roadrunner had in Germany for SPV, and so the people who had to go into the stores and to sell Roadrunner products, so they would pre-order Roadrunner stuff. Mm-hmm. They had a cassette to put in their car and listen to all the new releases. So they had one song of Carnivore, one of Mad Max, one of Madison, one song of the new Anvil record. And I would tell something, this is a Canadian band, it's their second record. The first one was the blah, blah, blah. And this is Carnivore. The guy's called Peter Steele. It's look like they're an apocalypse Earth and walking the Earth after everything is dead. And talking, a little bit bio stuff and a little bit of what kind of music it is and what they could sell or maybe where it would sell, and make a story like that on a cassette for an hour. And those people, the salesmen on the road going to all the record stores would have a story behind. If they go there and they don't know shit about metal, they could tell the sales guy, this is new Carnivore record. This is the third Metallica record they already toured, blah, blah, blah.
Speaking of Carnivore, do you have any idea how Case came across Carnivore in the first place?
No, I really don't. I can't tell you anything about that.
Interesting. That just seems to be, that's another blind spot. I can't seem to find any.
I really don't know how he got, no, I don't know, because this was something, I don't know what... I'm not even sure whether he had Road Racer. I don't think he had the Road Racer office even yet.
No, it was 84 Carnival, and the office opened in 86.
Yeah, okay. So he worked with Combat or not called...
In Effect? In Effect.
No. I'm talking about the distribution company. You had Combat and you had something with IN.
Important.
Important.
Yes.
So I think it came through people at Important.
Right. Okay.
So some people in New York, I think it was Important. Who did? I think it was a distributor. I'm not sure.
I think Important was the distribution, and then Relativity was linked to it, and Relativity had In Effect and Combat underneath that.
Okay,
so that's how it was structured, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't know. I didn't know the business, as I told you before, the business ties on the background. Especially not in New York. I didn't have anything to do with the business sides. Except for hooking him up with some labels, like getting him in touch with people who had a label.
Did you have at the time? Did you have like a favorite label? Like, if you had a band like, let's call it a Satan or a Mad Max, would you think, you know what, I want to give these guys
to Roadrunner? Yeah.
Was it always Roadrunner, or did you think Metal Blade or SPV or whatever?
Metal Blade didn't exist yet. They started in the early days. They didn't.
I mean, I'm just making examples, but you could have sent someone to Neat, couldn't you? Why would you always pick Roadrunner?
No, because Neat was ripping off bands.
Ooh, really?
Oh yeah.
How?
Dave Wood is a crook. When I did shows with Raven, I always paid David Wood, thinking he's the manager, but the band never saw one dime of the money I gave to Dave.
The Roadrunner.
I mean, they stayed in my place so often. Now you heard all the stories. I don't know.
Yeah. Roadrunners had a pretty. Its deal was. It was looked upon as good for like kids, like for young bands at the time, but not a lot of bands got a lot of money unless they sold loads. So sometimes the bands feel like they were ripped off, especially those older bands. Like Satan don't feel like they had a good experience with Roadrunner. I mean, I kind of empathize with Roadrunner because you can't sink too much money in a band, and it's only gonna provide returns if they sell records. And if they don't sell records, then it's kind of
I know. It's still the same now. I mean,
I'm
trying. I have a brilliant record here on my laptop. I shouldn't have handed to me by the artist, and I want to get it signed to a label. But they all think it's not going to sell well. I don't think it's one of the best records, especially of this year.
What I meant by that was I'm not trying to start a smear campaign.
Labels, they see, okay, this is a solo record by this artist. His main band where he is working with sells this. So the solo effort of this musician sells maybe 30%. And that's this much. And then we have to put advertising and buy it of blah, blah, blah. And no, we don't make enough profit, or no, we don't see that we make any money off it, so we don't sign it. It's all numbers, but I'm not in that kind of. I'm just a metal fan.
Yeah, man, I'm just interested that you'd prefer, you'd send Kay some tapes or some albums or something like that, and I'm interested as to why Dave from Neat was a crook. But it's fascinating to me because some of those early deals.
I gave him money for the shows I did with Raven, all the money they earned, and the band never saw a dime. But I heard that 10 years later. They didn't tell me then. I just would have given it to him and let the Dave Wood fucker stay at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think
But I don't know about this stuff. I'm just a fan. I don't see the dodgy dealings in the background, you know.
Yeah.
Not only Roadrunner.
Yeah. You're a professional metalhead. That's what
I
you are.
am. I'm a metal. I'm still a metal fan.
Yeah.
You know, working my ass off 20 hours a day on the magazine or helping bands and artists because they always, you know, they always find me for, you know, you got an idea where we should go with this or that, and I give them my 5 cents. You know.
Did you know of the Great Cat?
That little shit. Yeah, sure.
You know what? I got an interview with her last week.
Catherine Thomas.
Catherine
she's
Thomas.
Screaming at you.
Well, this is she wouldn't. This is the thing, right? So I emailed her in the same way I emailed you, said, "Can we have a quick chat?" And she said, "Send me the 5 most important questions by email." So I did, and then she said, "Right now, can you promote my upcoming CD on the
new 250 years Beethoven dead mush whatever?" Right?
Yeah. So when I did that. I did that off the back of the Steve Ricardo conversation. Then she comes back with the answers, and most of it was like a lot of it was just like the copy and paste of her press kit. A lot of it was like all caps saying, "Jim, are you on your knees yet?" All this sort of stuff. It's incredible because the thing about her is she's actually really fucking good, and she occupies that space like where Malmsteen is, where your Jason Beckers are, and as a young guitar player as I was about 15 years ago, I could have really used some just straightforward neoclassical guitar arrangements, but she wasn't there because she's not big, because no one will work with her because she's very abrasive.
Yeah. I met her 5 seconds in my life. The little shit came up to me. She said, "Well, I'm not on the cover of your magazine." I said, "Because you're not good enough." And that was the end of the conversation.
Were you at the
But I mail with Catherine Thomas all the time because that's her manager, Catherine Thomas. Catherine Thomas is Cat.
Of course, yeah. Does Catherine Thomas scream at you a lot?
No, not really, because she needs me. Hold on. Cat. Where is she? Oh, I can't find it right now.
It's okay.
Oh, here it is. She sent me her guitar pick in the mail a week ago. I said, "Okay, I need more." "Okay, then you have to put an article in." I said, "Okay, 1 pick will do." Great cat. But you mentioned my first error as an A&R manager.
Uh-huh.
I had a pen pal in Sweden called Johan Lannerback.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a 15-year-old kid jamming in the basement at home, recording stuff, jamming with bands like Silver Mountain, who I signed to Roadrunner, and Heavy Load. Johan Lannerback was a great guitar player. When my other pen pal, Mike Varney, said, "I need a guitar player for this band Steeler, but it sucks. Do you know somebody?" I said, "Yeah, I have this friend of mine called Johan Lannerback. He's really has a different style." And that's how Yngwie moved to America. And he had the Yngwie Malmsteen's Rising Force. The first record was only released in Japan. It was an only Japan release on Polydor. And I told Sage, "Listen, this is the best guitar player ever. He's the fastest, blah, 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 all this kind of." I said, "You should sign this band, but it's only out in Japan. Nobody puts it out." I said, "You should, and it's going to be the greatest guitar hero of all time, blah, blah, blah." Around that time, there was nobody playing like him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an arrogant asshole, I tell you that, but nobody was as good as him. So he put an offer out for signing Yngwie for the rest of the world, excluding Japan.
Right.
And what the Polydor office in Japan did with that offer, they went to all the other Polydor offices. "Look what this little Amsterdam label is offering to sign Yngwie," and then Polydor released it worldwide.
Shit. So there's
some history for you.
Yeah, man, that's fucking crazy.
There's some history. I was playing his cassettes on national radio in 1980 already.
Shit, man, that's crazy.
Oh yeah, I have a radio show as well. It's not a story, but
yeah. What would Case? So in terms of, if you give him recommendations, what was it that engaged him? Did he? Because he, again, as we say, he's an opera guy. So what would make him click and make him go, oh yeah, fuck yeah, let's sign this band?
I don't know. Maybe my enthusiasm, or I couldn't give him numbers and stuff. There was no. I mean, nowadays it's so easy, everything with the internet and stuff. But then it was so hard. I mean, you didn't have internet, you didn't have fax machines yet. Everything went totally different, in a totally different pace, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sending a letter to Lars offering him stuff, and a month later, maybe lucky, I get a letter back if we're not calling.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. It's hard to understand for somebody who's started, was born 20 years later, if you know what I mean. So it was all really weird. I mean, I was driving with my car to all the record stores and delivering the magazine, packages of magazines, instead of having a real distribution and stuff. That started, the real distribution started in '86 when I went together with Metal Hammer. In Belgium, for example, I had Mausoleum Records packaging my magazines in the boxes with albums to get them distributed through Belgium.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's so many side stories, but I'll explain how 1 and 1 becomes 2. There's a lot of little stuff in between where sometimes I have a little part in there.
Yeah. Did you know a guy called Gordon Beale?
Gordon Beale, German.
But
he started. The first guy he had to do really promo in Germany was Leo Lanz, and I worked him in and introduced him to all the German press, the magazines and stuff. People was at the Ride the Lightning tour for Metallica, where Tank was support act in '85. I was on the whole tour with Metallica because they're my friends.
Yeah, sure.
And I had Sace asked me to take care that if some magazines wanted to do an interview with Metallica, they also did Tank on the side, so they could do Tank. Yeah. There's a little story I don't know exactly. That's has to do with another crook, and Sace had a deal with GWR.
Yep.
It wasn't called GWR in the beginning. It was something with, let's say, Greenwood or something, but it had, the G was green. GWR was an English label run by a guy, I forgot his name, and he ripped off a band called Motorhead in England.
Yeah, I was going to say Motorhead.
Later he was.
I was going to say Motorhead lived at GWR, whatever it stands for. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the guy's name anymore, but he Sace had a deal with him as well. I don't think Roadrunner put out Motorhead in Europe, but maybe other bands did. I'm not sure. There was a link there between Sace and the guy running GWR.
They did later, not in the early days.
But he was there already, also in the early days. There was something. I'm not sure how that link.
I can maybe
they were already working stuff together all in the early days when I wasn't really involved then.
So the Motorhead manager, I can't remember the chap's name. I don't know if he was associated with the label. I think his name was Ian something.
Yeah, Ian that's right.
Yeah,
it wasn't Ian Sales, but definitely his name was Ian. I just wanted to tell you before you. So Ian was his name, and the company was called GWR. But before that, it was something called Greenwood. Or let me see my old Rolodex. Whether he's still in here.
I'll Google it while we're here. What's that? Weird.
Wasn't Gunn. That's Bobby Kopeck. It wasn't.
Oops. It certainly isn't Guinness World Records.
Something green. The GWR was called different.
It doesn't say on here, interestingly.
No, I can't find it here right now. No, different label. This is an old Rolodex, but.
Well, what I was going to say was in terms of a link.
I don't know. They worked together on stuff, but I really didn't know what it was in the early days already.
I know.
Lemmy told me that he got ripped off by that guy.
I was going to say the Case went to visit the management at some point, and apparently Case walked into the manager's office. I think it was this Ian chap, and he saw Jaguar's demo on the desk, and Case just went, Can you get me that band? And that's how Jaguar ended up on Roadrunner.
Really?
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, I knew I did shows with the Pepper Brothers. I had them on tour a lot of times together with Raven and Jaguar.
Yep.
I loved their singles. I wasn't too fond of their records. I mean, they're still back together. One of the Peppers is still in there.
Yeah, Gary.
Oh, Gary is? Okay.
Yeah, he's in Brazil at the minute.
Okay. But I don't know how that got. I didn't have nothing to do with them getting signed to the label. I don't know how that.
Yeah, it was just because we were talking about Motorhead and the management and financial links and stuff
well,
like that.
I don't know, but I mean, in my magazine, that's why I remember so much stuff. This is part 4. I have a new wave, a 12 page new wave of British heavy metal record. New wave of British heavy metal. So this is an edition with all the rare stuff that came out, all the singles, but you cost like £1,000 now to get them, you know, all the rare stuff. And the month before this is the month before, I had the important records on the label, like the first 2, Ravens, Diamond Head, Saxon, Iron Maiden, Jaguar. So all this, you know, so I know a little bit about that time now because they all came back to me.
Yeah.
One thing I did the book, as I told you, I did the bookings for Accept and I did the bookings for Raven, and the booking their shows in Europe until including the Restless and Wild tour for Accept. After that, when Balls to the Walls came out, John Jackson was doing their bookings because he could get them a deal support opening up for Judas Priest. Right. That's why they left me and went to do that. It's no problem. I had bands enough I did shows with. But the sound guy for Accept, the front of house guy, was Michael Wagner. And and he started a company with the singer Udo Dirkschneider called Double Trouble Productions, and that's how when Raven All for One record, their third album, was produced by Udo and Michael Wagner, and that's how the single came out, where Udo was singing Inquisitor and Born to Be Wild with Raven.
Yeah,
it was also released by Johnny Zazula in America as a picture disc, and. There's a little side story. It has nothing to do with Roadrunner, but it's nice because I was working with Accept and their sound guy, Michael, at one show I did in Horst in the south of the Netherlands with Accept. He introduced George Lynch to me. I said, okay, yeah, he's an American guitar player. Okay, nice. What's your band called? I'll probably call it Duckin'. Okay. Yeah, Michael is producing our first record, Breaking the Chains, in Hanover right now. I said, okay, nice. Okay. I'm curious, you know. Never heard of them. There was nothing out there. I didn't know about the band.
Yeah.
And then Michael Ware called me. I'm gonna move to America. I go to Redondo Beach. Don Duckin has a house there. I can stay in a room with him, and we're gonna start producing bands together.
Cool.
That's it, because it's a nice story. So I'll do the short version.
Yeah, sure.
A couple of months later, he called me. Mike, I have a problem. I have 2 bands who we can produce, but I don't know which one I should take. Can I have your advice? She said, sure. Sent me their stuff. So he sent me, I'll grab it out of here. And he sent me this. Where is it? It must be here somewhere. Okay. I'm not sure which one it is. on Letter Records, their own label, Letter Records. Let's see, where's this one? This is Elektra. Okay, this is their own. This is on their own label on Letter Records. He sent me this one, Too Fast for Love by Motley Crue.
Yep.
He sent me a cassette with 12 songs by a band called Great White.
Oh.
That we can produce the first record of Great White and the second record of Motley Crue.
Awesome.
Which band should we do? I thought, well, Motley Crue is like poser, glam, blah, blah, blah. I don't like it. And that Great White is a little bit southern, a little bit boring rock. I don't like either of them. I said, well, which one should I do? I said, well, maybe you go with the band with the better musicians, maybe you have a better chance.
Mm.
So he and Don produced the first Great White record, and somebody else did Shout at the Devil.
Yeah.
And Great White did okay, but Shout at the Devil went.
Right. Yeah.
So we always fun about that one.
Yeah.
But that's another Roadrunner story, but it's a nice.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Story.
Did you ever know Holly Lane?
Holly. She worked in the New York office. I had her on the phone several times when I worked at Roadrunner. I don't think I ever met her. I don't know. Maybe at the 25-year anniversary in New York party, maybe. But I don't know her, only by name. And I don't think I ever met her.
Yeah, she was one of the first American hire by Case. Steve Ricardo was the second. And together they opened that New York office. And in my chat with Steve, he was going on about how it was incredibly difficult because they were just two young 20-somethings trying to juggle all the shit and get all the bands working and all this stuff. And then Case is ringing them up every day, trying to get, numbers back and trying to get the budgets fixed and stuff like that. And they're just kids and they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
No, I just wondered.
Sorry?
It was Road Racer then.
Yeah, because of the
Warner deal, the Warner Brothers
the Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner.
Kind of an agreement to use the name of Roadrunner, and for a while it was Road Racer.
Yeah. Which
had to do with licensing and
Roadrunner everywhere else, but US it was always Road Racer.
Yeah.
But yeah. Were you close with Roadrunner when Monty joined? You see like this massive upsurgence of like progressive thrash and those kind of really balls to the wall, almost post Metallica in a way. Did you like any of that stuff, like the Realm stuff? And you mentioned you didn't really take much of a fancy to Sepultura.
No, the first two records I didn't like. I like Arise and Chaos AD and all that stuff. I worked with the band later, and Andre, of course, when he was doing their shows with Sacred Reich, the tour where Gloria met Max. Yeah. But those were all little bands. I mean, the only funny thing why it was interesting, they were from Brazil,
That was the angle. Yeah.
So that was weird. I mean, that was kind of weird. But I didn't have to do much with the I never went to the American office before maybe the 25-year anniversary thing in New York. I stayed in Europe. I was busy enough here with my magazine.
Yeah.
And
tell me about the 25-year anniversary show then, because that was a big deal at the time. No one had done anything like that.
Yeah, it didn't sell at all. I mean, it wasn't busy there. It didn't sell a lot of tickets, and I met a lot of people for the first time. I met the guy who, that was nice. I think at the party there was a guy called, the guy who signed Nickelback to Roadrunner.
I've got his name here because he's on my hit list.
Guy.
Where is he? Here he is. Ron Berman.
I met him there. I said, listen, a friend of mine, they have a band. They're on Wind Up, but they're buying themselves out. And I think it would be a good addition to Roadrunner. But Ron didn't sign them. A couple of years later, they got him. I'm talking about Alter Bridge. Because they went for the second record, they went to Universal for the Blackbird album. I'm still in touch, not daily, but I talk to the guys all the time because I'm helping Alter Bridge. I'm helping them in the background a lot, getting them in touch with the right people. And I tried to get them signed for the Blackbird record. But then they signed to Universal because Roadrunner didn't get back to them or whatever. But I tipped Ron Berman. They tried to get away from the label. If you want to have him, you should act now. But he hasn't done it, so they didn't sign him for that great record. But I was in Florida, and Mark Tremonti called me. Can you come? We have a warehouse where we practice. Can you come with your wife? And sure. So we drove up there in the Orlando area, and it was a huge stage, full PA and stuff, and a two-person couch in the middle of the room. Me and my wife had to sit there, and they played the whole Blackbird record like half a year before it came out. Played me all the songs because they want to have my opinion of it. Because I'm never beat around the bush. I always straight tell you whether it sucks or not. And I'm always that honest. That's why bands keep on sending me stuff. Where should we go with this and that? And I give my free advice. As just I played you 10 seconds of a band, but I can't get him signed. That's weird. But because the business is pretty in a weird situation right now.
It's in a very weird place. I was speaking to
so nobody is trying to fork out a lot of money to get an artist.
I was speaking to Andrew Field of APF Records. It's like a stoner doom metal record in Manchester, and we were talking about the semantics of it. And there's no point in investing too much up front, because most of the time a band already has an album that they've made. So really, the only value that if a band approaches you is because you've got profile and you've got a distribution model in a way, because you've got a brand. But if you want to develop an artist and if you want to really invest the time into it, you're going to have to fork out a lot of money and be in it for the long haul, which a lot of people
doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. It's just the risk is too great, really, because you can't do what Roadrunner did. You can't go, here's $5,000 and we'll sign 20 bands and hope that one sells out. You can't do that anymore. You can't take that risk because you'll get thrown out to dogs.
I know. It's business has changed.
Definitely.
And that's a pity, not to the good. I mean, never in the world there has been so much interest in music, but now everybody consumes it to half-inch speakers as an MP3. Where when I go to Elvis, to Michael Basquiat, where he has a studio near Orlando, when I go there, he has an old SSL table, old analog. The hairs go up in your hair when he plays you the music.
Yeah.
That sound, it's not there anymore. It's only a few people who, kids, they're a fan of this week. They're a fan of this band, and they listen to their MP3 songs, singles. They don't release albums almost anymore. And then tomorrow they're a fan of a totally different kind of band.
Yeah.
It's so it's nothing. When I sound like an old man. I looked, who have they toured with? Who produced the record? Then I'm going to find out what else did he produce? What did those bands they toured with kind of music do? And that's how you discover bands. I'm still kind of doing that stuff, but
it's been interesting because there's many in this Roadrunner project. There's been so many bands that I just completely missed. Missed, but I had to obviously start from the start in 80 and just work my way through every single one. And I'm finding loads which I've fallen in love with, but I would have had no chance of knowing. My first Typo Negative album was Dead Again in 2007. I'd never heard Bloody Kisses. I'd never had. And then when I was doing my homework, it was like, holy fucking shit, how did I miss this? And then there's another Realm, which is another progressive. That was Monty's first signing before Sepultura. Yeah. They're an incredible band as well. It's just so much fun.
I talked to them, I think, last year at the Keep It True festival. I think they played.
Yeah, they've come back for a couple of reunion shows.
Yeah,
they're really good. And Cyclone as well. Cyclone were
Belgian band. I saw those, I think.
Yeah.
There was a band competition. Actually, the singer, I'm at record fairs where I have a booth where I sell stuff. And he's always next to me. The singer who was in that band,
Guido.
Guido, yeah. And I see him once a year at the record store fair. He has a booth next to me. So I signed the band. There was a contest in Belgium where I was one of the juries, and the winner signed a deal with Roadrunner. That's how Cyclone came to the label.
Oh, Guido has an interesting story.
They were the winner of a Belgian band competition, and the prize was to get signed to Roadrunner. That's how Cyclone came to the label.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah. Guido had some interesting stories about Roadrunner.
Yeah, probably.
Dude, I've taken up too much of your time, but I've got two more questions. I could keep going on, and we could keep doing this.
Me too. I know there's so many stories, but probably my wife is gonna swear at me if I'm not. Otherwise, make another appointment and call me back.
Let's
tomorrow.
do it. I'm good. Let's I'll drop you an email after this, and we'll talk after, and we'll schedule.
Yeah, send me some questions. I can look some stuff up. But there's so much history here and so much stuff I've done and I forgot about, and then later, oh yeah, I did this. But then I just send an email or do one phone call, and it changes totally the career of a band. This sounds arrogant now, but it's
not.
That's what happened. And nowadays I'm talking to bands like now with the where we don't have live reviews or stuff in our magazine. Hey, go on Landerbeck. No, I'm scanning old issues and digitize them and put them online for sale to make some extra money. Because I don't have advertising from festivals now, club shows, booking agents. All those advertising is gone now, and I have to keep the magazine afloat. So I make some extra money by scanning, magazines from 1980. I'm now at number one, I think 1990. Yeah, number one, 1990 is the next one. Cool. So I have 10 years of magazines already scanned and digital on my website for sale for a little bit to get some money and, to keep afloat. It's tough times.
Well, I'll make sure when I put this up, I'll put this up like tonight or something, and I'll make sure I put all the links and things like that. But I've got one more question, and let's definitely reschedule, and I'll gear my questions less towards the business side and more towards the bands themselves. Yeah, because I think that's where you are in it.
Yeah, I don't know the business side. I don't know. But so, you should talk to Ed van Zyl because he knows more about that one.
I'm going to need the spelling from you.
But his phone number.
Yeah, drop me. I'll drop you a mail.
I'll send you his email address.
Yeah, definitely. So last question, and then your wife can get back to you. Have you ever seen a ghost? Such a weird one, but I'm asking everyone.
I did shows with Merciful Fate. And every time when Merciful Fate was in the country, some unexplainable things happened when I was doing shows with them. And in the beginning, blah, blah, blah. But if you're driving back from a show in Hengelo where they played in the club, and we drive back to the Motel Eindhoven or to Andre's house where they stayed, and in the middle of a 2-lane road in a dark wooden secluded area, a wife in a white gown or a woman or a lady in a white gown stands in the middle where the dotted line is in the middle of the 2 lanes and steps in front of your car just when you're getting there at 3 a.m. and I just could swerve around it. Then you think, oh yeah, sure, I've got Kim Bendix Peterson sitting in the back of the car. Or when kind of an eagle kind of bird or a smaller whatever falcon is diving towards your car trying to attack you when you're driving. Or you see something at the end of the night and you stop at the road and there's a huge lake of blood, a huge pool of blood in the middle of the road. You just look on the back of your seat and say, oh yeah, sure, just keep on driving. Yes, I didn't see a ghost, but I saw a ghost, of course, because they play some festivals here. But not a ghost, but I had some weird stuff happening when I was doing shows with Merciful Fate, yes.
I find it so interesting how the link there is Merciful Fate.
No, it is.
It's always there.
When the guys were around.
That's crazy. That's insane.
Yeah. But it's true.
Hey. Is what it is.
I have Andre to prove it because he was sitting in the car next to me.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Right, I'm going to let you go. Well, thanks very much. I'll put this up. I'll put this up as soon as I can. I tend to edit these things straight away once I'm